Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
So I'd love to bring Lumiere to life for our listeners. Can you give us some real world examples of how it works?
I'll give you a variety, and starting with some work we've done with Yellowstone for Paramount / Paramount Plus. Yellowstone and its prequels and sequels. There's I think a sequel coming. There's two prequels, 1883 and 1923. We've worked on the entire story world of Yellowstone, including those two shows and one or two to come, around very granular testing and insights regarding how they promote and market the show. So really getting deep into how the communications and the various elements of the show can appeal to different audiences, ranging from, of course, the obvious demographic kinds of cases to the variations of audiences that have to do with Western lovers and have to do with people who are classically watch family dramas. And in all the different sort of filters and slices of the audience, understand what specific aspects of the show and promotion of the show, whether it's in key art, images of the show, or whether it's in the promos and trailers themselves, get at what is driving interest or could drive interest in Yellowstone. So I'm happy to say that I think we were at least had a mild positive effect on Yellowstone's success in terms of reaching their audience, and as well to help them move forward with the adjacent shows that they're now airing and will air. And so I think that's one example of how Lumiere was used. And obviously those promos and trailers are anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute and a half or 2 minutes long. And so we get detailed reactions at almost every second of those or every scene as to what's driving interest and how it might drive interest more or less compared to other elements in the promo.
I'm
ranging
assuming
from
that's
very granular kinds of things to, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm assuming it's cross device as well, so not just your TVs or not just the mobile
absolutely.
phones, iPads, etc.
Yeah, it's cross device, and it works fairly seamlessly across any device most days.
Yeah.
We occasionally, all mobile can be difficult, but it's absolutely a multi-device information source. So Yellowstone's one very specific and I think successful example of how we've used Lumiere over the past few years. From the beginning, by the way, from season 1, which was in 2018.
And did you notice any changes throughout the seasons, I guess, as your platform improved, as the audience behavior changed, etc.?
Yeah, good question. So I was actually teaching at a class last week guest teaching a class at NYU, and we were talking with the students about this exact question. So early on, what you're trying to do is generate interest in the concept, setting, and or story of the show. Later on, you've got the show is actually got a flow. It's certainly, at least in the case of Yellowstone, reached a significant audience. And so what starts to drive interest and drive success becomes not the general concept or the general setting, but specific aspects of this and specific storylines. And so what happens is over time, Paramount and other companies we work with start to promote elements that are more, for lack of a better word, plot lines within the overall story. And the work becomes diving deeper into those plot lines and characters that have surfaced. In the case of Yellowstone, for instance, the daughter, because she's a strong actress and a fairly powerful presence in the show, she became more and more important in many ways to the success of the show, I think, in the viewing overall, as well as the success in the promotion, obviously, because she sort of jumps off the screen most of the time when you see her. She's one of those people who's got that gift. So that's a nice evolution of the success there, is that we were able over the years of the 5 or so seasons, I think it's 5 seasons of the show, to be able to refine how they reached their audience and how they thought about promoting the show. And obviously it became something of a cultural force in season 3 or so, where it reached that critical mass of something beyond just a show that people like.
So look, you've touched on a point which I had in my mind earlier, that video's evolving. We no longer have broadcast television as one of our main forms of advertising, through 15, 30, 60-second spots, for instance. So we're looking to do a lot more integrations with our advertising spend to try and reach our target audiences, etc. Are there any other ways that you're seeing in terms of changing behaviors that companies, organizations are needing to make in video to try and reach their audiences?
Put simply, so to give you some background to that, yes. I think, and you can tell me if this is going in the right direction, is the one answer to that question, is that we're seeing a number of companies, Roku, NBC, Universal / Peacock, which is their streaming service, doing innovations with advertising and with branding that are successful. And I think what's going on technologically, as well as just the minds that people have these days, and the open minds, I should say, about this. So in the case of Roku, they've got something called Roku City. I don't know if you've seen it or heard about it, but Roku's a platform, essentially a really interesting platform that allows for streaming services and all sorts of content. Roku's sort of a foundational platform for them. And what Roku does on their sort of, when you're not actually watching something, and they've got something called Roku City that they created, that's a city that's sort of panning by you as you are just watching, the Roku entry screen or homepage, which it's not really a homepage, it's more than that. But so they've got this image of a city, an artificial city they've created. But within that city, they've created they've integrated brands. And so what they've done is create an environment which is a really seamless integration of Roku's homepage, or home space is a better word for it. And I think they have a specific term that I'm not remembering at the moment, but they've created a seamless integration of their home space with the brands that are able to and desiring to be able to be present and vivid in that Roku city. So it's obviously a brand integrated into a city is really natural, right? It's just a digital city. So Roku's doing an interesting thing there.
So
NBCU's
it's almost
something different. So go ahead.
So Roku City sounds like a precursor to the metaverse, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, in a very simple and non-invasive way at the moment. And so you don't wander around in Roku City in the way that you might in the metaverse, but I'm sure soon we will be able to. And I'm sure they've got some pretty interesting things in mind for it. But it feels like that. It feels like it's just the precursor to it, and it's fun. They've got the right attitude to it, and the sort of, it's somewhat playful, and at the same time is doing a service to both the platform and the brands that are and the content that's served through the platform. So that's one example of something that we're seeing. Another, if we have time, is NBCU is doing alternative, I would say, for lack of a better word, pods and ad formats. And obviously Roku was an alternative format, but the NBCU is doing something a little different than Roku is, in the sense that they're experimenting with different pod lengths, of course, which is important, but also things that a couple of other streamers have started to do as well, which is if you are watching a lengthy ad pod, then you may be ad free and basically able to binge ad free for a certain amount of time. So they're experimenting with the intermittence of the ads and of branded content of various kinds, and the format of them as well, of course. And so, the NBCU is actually nicely at the forefront of this in terms of their willingness to innovate and to try different kinds of experiences, whether it's in the length of the pods and how they're placed, or in terms of some interactivity and placement within the actual content itself. We try to, as much as possible, support, encourage, and of course, provide the knowledge and insights about companies doing things that in some cases might be called risky, or at the very least are quite innovative. And so we want to be part of an ecosystem that is moving the intersection of content and technology, which we opened with, that we want to be helping move that ecosystem forward in various ways and showing when things work, either that they worked and or how they worked, because a lot of companies are doing some great work, whether it's just on the kinds of messages they provide or in terms of doing some of the innovative kinds of ad experiences and content experiences we were talking about. And to the extent that those are successful, we want to make that obvious to the people doing it, so that will be reinforced, as well as find new ways to open new doors for other innovative experiences that branch off from those. So I'm happy to see when this kind of thing happens, and it happens well. I think it's win-win for the viewers, for the producers, for the platforms, and obviously for the brands if things go well.
That's right. So I think that almost wraps us up now. Is there any final comments that you wanted to cover before we close, Steven?
I guess if I had to look back on what we were talking about and look forward in terms of what I see and what we see at our company happening, I would say that I see, I think this is maybe an interesting thought, I hope, is that I see a lot of convergences going on, one of which is the obvious one, which is the convergence of various types of content, traditional content, with new types of technology and enablements by AI, among others. The other convergence, the obvious one, is the convergence that we were talking about just now of brands with content in a deeper sense than just placing an ad inside content. I think that's a nice and interesting and positive convergence. And a third one I would say is the one that we briefly talked about. I think we're going to see more and more convergences of analog and digital, or physical world and digital world in various ways. We're seeing that in some music sort of performances that are pretty very interesting, and sophisticated use of digital and kinds of tools, devices, and content on stage. We're seeing that in all sorts of things that obviously we experience on the web, but where the real world or real world elements are pulled into the web in live fashion. So I think the convergence of live and virtual, or live and analog and digital, is something that I think is a third convergence. And so my large point is, I think we're seeing this sort of meshing of a lot of things that classically were separate, and it's fascinating, exciting, and it's great from the point of view of course, the content creators. I think it's actually great from the point of view of advertisers and brands and various kinds of possibilities for integration and sponsorships. And ideally, and if those two things work well, it's great for the viewers and the / participants in all of that.
No, very true.
So I think convergence is my word of the day.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Steven.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Michael.
Really appreciated your what you've shared and what you're doing with Lumiere. It's fascinating. So keep up that, and looking forward to seeing what else comes out of you and the team there too.
Excellent. Thank you.
And for the listeners out there, if you have liked what you've heard today, feel free to share this with someone else who might also like. Subscribe to the podcast as well. Would always be appreciative of that. And until next time, I guess, thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.